Good morning or good day, depending on what time of day you get to watch this video. This goes along with your wrap up or day 4 for the ready jars. We're going to go over the parts of a scientific experiment today. The first thing we need to talk about is control. We always have some sort of control set up, and the control is all the parts that you will keep the same throughout your entire experiment. So for us, when we're talking our ready jars, we kept the same type of jar. In fact, we used the same type of jar for both Miss Anderson and for myself. So we could even then compare what happened in the two classrooms. We used the same type of meat in all of the jars, and in both labs, we used all of the same meat. And in fact, we went as far as it was meat that I brought from home. It was from the same package, bought the same time, bought on the same day. All of those are things that would be considered a control. Okay, all those things that we are controlling and keeping the same. We made sure all of the jars had the same, and I'm looking at my stinky jars, had all of the same exposure. So we took them out at the same time. Both my jars and Miss Anderson's jars went out at the same time. They spent the same amount of time outside, so the same time of day, the same amount of exposure outside. We brought them in at the same time of day. They were in the same area outside, so we made sure that all of those things were in our control. So controls, things that we are controlling throughout the experiment. Your variables, so we have controls and variables. Your variables, just like math, are things that are going to change, things that we are testing in the experiment. So for us, there are two types of a variable in any sort of scientific experiment. We have the independent variable and we have the dependent variable. The difference, or the hard part, is telling the difference between the two. So starting with independent variable, this is a variable that you, as the scientist, are changing. Okay, so when you look at the ready jars, we really were testing what happens with an open jar versus a netted jar. So that is our variable. How much exposure to that environment are they getting? So independent variable for us this time around is our open jar versus our netted jar. The dependent variable is what is being measured. So the best way I can help you remember the difference between the two is if you think of dependent variable, think of data. So your dependent variable is the data you are collecting. They both start with D's, so hopefully that will help you make that connection. Okay, so for us, our ready jars, our dependent variable is pretty much is life growing. Unfortunately, we failed at this experiment this time around for whatever reason. We didn't get life growing in our jars. But you still, those observations that you recorded between the two jars is your dependent variable. It's the data that you've collected. Every experiment has a control group, something that you are going to look and compare your results to. Okay? For us, our control group is something we haven't changed. We haven't allowed outdoor exposure to anything along that line, and that is our sealed jar. Our sealed jar is the jar that is our control group for this one. We're comparing everything to that jar of meat that has been sealed off. We shouldn't see life growing in it. We shouldn't see a whole lot of color change or anything along that line, and we truly haven't. The only thing that kind of surprised us was the bubbles on day 3. But yeah, that is our controlled group. Okay, so good scientific experiments have the controls, those things that we are going to keep absolute the same throughout the entire experiment. Your independent variable, what you as a scientist are changing, your dependent variable, what you're measuring, and you always have that control group that is going to be there to compare all your results to. Hopefully this helps you finishing out your ready sheet, and we will see you later.